In this week's Parsha, we read at the end of the Parsha about the different holidays. And the Torah says specifically regarding the holiday of Sukkot that there's a mitzvah to be happy. There's a requirement to be happy. And the Rambam writes that this is, well, on all holidays we're meant to be happy, especially on Sukkot we're meant to be happy. And then he writes something very interesting. And he says that this simcha that we rejoice through the performance of doing mitzvahs and our love of God, this joy that we have, the Rambam says it's a avoda gedola. It's a big job. And if we withhold ourselves from this joy, he says, it's appropriate that we might even be held accountable for our failure to be joyful. Which at first glance is very surprising. One would think that the person is either happy or they're not happy. You're blessed with the genes to be happy, or you're not blessed with those genes to be happy. So how can God require of us to be happy on Sukkot and in general in the performance of mitzvos? How are we just meant to bring about happiness? So perhaps there's maybe two ways that we can actually bring about happiness. I'm sure there's a lot of ways, but two ways that I wanted to maybe look at this morning. So when we think about this requirement to be happy, it says in Psalms, in Tehillim, Ivdu as Hashem besimcha. We're supposed to serve God with happiness. Besimcha. If you take the word besimcha and rearrange the letters, it comes out machshava, which is thoughts. So through certain kind of thoughts, we could actually be happy. So much of our happiness can be what we choose to focus on, right? So I'll give an example. Last night, unfortunately, the Denver Nuggets suffered a horrible, horrific 45-point defeat to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I could have just woken up today depressed and miserable about that and upset and stressed about it. And that would be a natural way to go. And that might kind of ruin my morning and bring me down. But at the same time, I can think how they have a tremendous team. They're one game away from advancing to the semifinals. And I could be like a Lakers fan whose favorite team right now is currently in Cancun after their season ended. So my team is still doing well. They've done well. We have, even if they end up losing Game 7, God forbid, we are watching a historically great player every night. There's so much to be grateful for. So that is one way perhaps to bring about happiness, is through focusing on the good. And that's obviously a silly example in basketball, but there's so many other examples. Like maybe, maybe it's a little too hot for my comfort today. But thank God, like I am in this beautiful state and I can look to the west and see the mountains and I can go inside and experience air conditioning. So there's a lot to focus on. It's our choice, like what we focus on, and we can just choose to focus on the good, and that can make us happier. The other just tool that we can do to be happier, I would argue, on a similar vein, is gratitude, right? To feel gratitude for the many, many blessings in our lives. And oftentimes, maybe we fail to do this because we simply don't recognize a blessing that something might be. So for example, if God forbid I wasn't able to see, what amount of money would I pay to have restorative surgery to heal my eyes that I could see? I would pay a tremendous amount of money. So if I am blessed to see, then that is something that maybe I should actually feel grateful for. Because I usually wake up every day, go about my life, I don't realize and actively acknowledge how awesome it is to see, or I can hear, or I can walk, or I can smell. So many of us after COVID couldn't smell. I was so depressed. Took the joy out of eating. And it was very depressing. So in life, if we just focus again on, or notice on the many, many, many blessings in our lives. And maybe one way to do that is before we go to bed every night, think of 3 things that happened that day that we're grateful for. And then maybe on Friday night, on Shabbos, we just review the list. And hopefully that'll transform our brains to be able to experience gratitude, to focus on the good. And we can work on this avoda gedola, this great job that the Rambam says we have to feel joy and happiness in the performance of mitzvahs in service of God. We should all feel the joy, be happy, be joyful, no matter what we're going through in life, and try to live a life of joy and happiness and gratitude. Have a great Shabbos.